Russian troops were rapidly breaking through to the Kiev. The convoys were moving from Belarus through Chernobyl, and in a day and a half they had to walk some 20 kilometers to take up positions close to the Ukrainian capital. In the evening of February 25, 2022, an explosion rang out near the village of Kozyroviki. What had happened the hours before? Just listen to these conversations, to these voices.
Sasha, it's me. Look, I'm standing on the dam. There are military personnel here. There are personnel.
Give the phone to someone senior, immediately.
Hello.
Good afternoon. My name is Alexander, the call sign, Tykahad. Now it's such a thing from the headquarters. Guys, we need to turn on the reverse in Irpin.
From which headquarters?
From the ground forces. I can give the phone to the general if you want.
Okay, I get it. It is impossible to make a reverse, only mechanical damage.
Will it be possible to stop this mechanical damage in any way?
No. Neither reverse nor mechanical damage is allowed. There are shields. You can blow up the shield in the upper part.
Can you make it so that there is a little controlled descent?
No, I can't. You know, there's a shield. A 5-meter column of water presses on it. You can't lift it. You can't blow it up.
I get it. I understood. Man, I am a technically literate person. I understand you, so look at it this way. What do you need to blow off its top? Is a shield divided or is it solid?
It is solid, metal. Here is a single metal cladding, 5 millimeters.
What if you cut it with a grinder for too long?
No, it's not seriously.
Through a breach in the lock, water from the Kiev Sea began to spill over the floodplains of the Irpin River and fill the peatlands, turning the wooded area into impassable swamps. A natural obstacle was formed on the way of Russian equipment, stopping the Latin V-marked Urals, tanks, fighting vehicles, infantry fighting vehicles, and armored personnel carriers. The stuck cars and the Muscovites themselves were desperately showered by Ukrainian infantry and artillery. The breakthrough of Putin's troops from the northern right bank choked in its own blood. We have exclusive materials that reveal the truth about the great operation to protect Kiev with river water. Consider this short film as a tribute to those who did a great thing without receiving awards and public acceptance. Consider it as an honor to those civilians and military for whom the highest value is not medals or likes on social networks, but the freedom of their native land. We will be able to voice some of the names. Other part of them we will voice after the victory. The proposal to flood the floodplains of the Irpin River was submitted by Alexander Dmitriev, call sign Tykahad. His understanding that flooded areas are able to deter the enemy army came from the experience gained during off-road competitions organized in the Kiev region in peacetime.
In 2005, when I started off-roading, we did such training along the Irpin River when there was a big flood in the spring. We called it joyriding. The swamp was so delicious, as the Jeepers say, and the first thought, when the enemies came out and it was clear where they were coming from, was to flood the Irpin, that is, to raise the water so that it would become an obstacle. Because it would be impossible to move with tracked vehicles at all.
To implement the plan, an urgent meeting with the commander was needed, who was supposed to approve the operation. Because of his ties acquired at the beginning of the Russian aggression in 2014, this became possible. Initially, the option of launching the reverse of the pumping station, which pumps water from the Irpin River to the Kiev reservoir, was considered. However, structurally, the hydroelectric complex is designed in such a way that the outlet pipes of the pumps are located above the level of the Kiev Sea. It became clear that it was possible to let water from the Dnieper into the floodplains of the Irpin River only by mechanically damaging special shields, which were a thin point of a powerful dam. But after the destruction of the shields, it will be impossible to control the water level, despite the fact that the level of the reservoir is raised by several meters. Therefore, it was decided to partially blow up the dam sluice in Kozyroviki. They did not want to completely destroy it in order to avoid a catastrophe in the nearest villages and give people time to evacuate in case of flooding of houses. And this was not the only warning.
Hello. I'm sorry, just a second. This may also lead to the shutdown of the Kiev hydroelectric power plant.
Repeat.
If the sea level drops, there will be no water for the hydroelectric power plant.
A lot worse can happen there if. I get it.
That's it, I just warned.
Of course, I understood. Thank you. I will report now.
However, at that time, the power plant was doing its part of the preparation for the operation. The discharge of water to the turbines was reduced to raise the level in the Kiev Sea. At the dam in Kozyroviki, they first tried to raise the steel shield with a special crane. This manipulation was envisaged by the engineering project. However, even the employees of the hydroelectric complex themselves said that no one had ever done this since the very moment of construction. Supported by a 5-meter column of water, the shutter did not even move. At that time, there was no alternative to detonation. In the upper part of the steel shield, a grinder and a gas cutter began to weaken so that the explosion destroyed only one cell. Nader serves in the armed forces. At that time, he was still a civilian. Now he recalls with light humor how everything happened in the first days of the full-scale invasion.
Sasha dialed and said that something had to be done. We organized a Mercedes there, loaded cylinders there, recruited cutters, tubes, rods, and we flew to do something there. An electrician was called, an electrician came, connected a crane for us, we controlled something there, looked for cables, drove around the village. We collected a bunch of cables so that they thought about carefully remove the shield, but a column of water prevented me from doing it. I wanted to cut something with a cutter, but I couldn't do that with that cutter. And, until the dynamite was brought.
Sonia, from me personally, observations. Men having the guys having cutting torch, they are definitely trying to do something with a cutter, but we need a sapper.
Coming to you.
We're doing it now. You scratch the outline at least so that exactly along the contour, like the paper is torn off.
And this was another critical task, to bring explosives to a position that at any moment could already be fired upon by enemy artillery or one of the Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups that had infiltrated the forests and villages near Kiev. At the backdrop of the chaos among the civilian population, which was leaving the capital en masse in the first fierce battles with the aggressor, reliable people were needed who were ready to take risks and transport dangerous goods. Experienced sappers are also needed who can perform the correct detonation at the hydroelectric complex.
Yes, Sasha.
Yes, I'm listening, Uncle Vova.
We met here, we are loading. We called the guy and he said that there was an enemy column from the direction of Katyuzanka.
You need to get to Kozyroviki. First of all, in Kozyroviki.
I understand.
They will then turn to Havrilivka, if anything. Come on, just faster.
In the afternoon of February 25th, a group of civilian off-roaders, loading with hundreds of kilograms of TNT, moved from Kiev to the dam. The dangerous cargo was accompanied by 2 experienced military sappers, who were found in an emergency mode by the current advisor to the commander of the ground forces, Alina Shevtsova.
And that's all. Oleksandra, Tykohod, gathered us. Guys, you are needed to help, we need to do it. We went, immediately refueled completely so that we had the opportunity. Explosives. 500 kilograms. They loaded it into my car. Then not documents, nothing. We drove like this. We drove up to the Dokhna station, and the Kamaz truck was standing there from the side of Odessa, 300 meters there. It was impossible to turn to get there on the other side. Here the cars drove in 4 to 5 rows. Well, what to do? The guys came out, blocked the road, stopped the cars, and broke off the absorber. We drove into oncoming traffic, drove to load and drove there, to the dam. I drove to the dam there, to the lock. They unloaded everything, put it in, the guys said, thus, drive the car around the corner, hide and watch there. If anything, run away. As soon as we started to leave, the phone rang. They say, blow it up so that they don't get out of there. They came back again, planted explosives, blew it up so that heavy equipment would not pass.
Was there shelling at that moment?
They started shooting, yes, we heard.
Have you heard the small arms?
Yes, there were small ones.
Was there no artillery?
No, I didn't hear any artillery. Whether it's Kavkazets or Boroda, I don't know. Someone called them that there was a sabotage and reconnaissance group, a Russian one, approaching there. They told us to leave quietly and quickly.
Listen to Sig.
Sanka, look, I'm now writing in the journal for our actions.
Yes, well done.
Yes, look, at whose order?
Major Canelin.
Major?
Canelin.
The bridges had already been mined by this time, in the early days. But the dam, it was not mined. That is, there were no sappers of this field. We planted explosives in the water. Hey, we're waist deep in water, above the knee, even more. It is very difficult, because we blew up the dam from the side of the Kiev Sea. Because it was already so inconvenient from the side of Irpin, and it was difficult to blow it up, because there was water. And the fact that there were already enemies a kilometer from us. There, the Katarovsi were on the other side. First, the locks were blown up, and then the second command came, to blow up the bridge. To damage it. If only their people could cross. I went down into the flap, there it was so wide, maybe about half a meter, and it had stiffeners that you could jump in. I climbed there, it turns out, and tried to do something there. Then we threw dynamite right into that membrane, and in the water the dynamite exploded and tore out a meter diameter hole, and it filled the river there in a week.
The worst thing was to come back when it was getting dark. Already our troops were standing checkpoints around in the villages. You drive up there, and machine guns and grenade launchers are pointed at you. It's good that we had a Caucaset and a Barota with us. They have been serving since 2014. They have connections there.
After the detonation, the phase of waiting for the effect began. The enemy came close, conducted additional reconnaissance in order to advance further to Lydas, to Moshchun, to Stoyanka, and our eyes near Kozaroviki were observing. At the same time, they recorded the movement of Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups.
There was panic all around. People were running, some were already reconnoitering, tanks were already approaching the dam. Already in Dimmer there was an occupation on the 25th, as if I remember, because on the 26th I came to the dam. Every day I looked at how full it was, and on the 26th, I was already with the sabotage and reconnaissance group, which was shaking hands with me there, roughly speaking. 3 sabotage and reconnaissance groups. I fished out their passports there in the dam. They drove in this direction to us, did their reconnaissance, came back, and I was sitting on the dam like a fool, in a hat and felt boots, like, oh, where is it a tank?
Did they have Ukrainian passports?
Well, Ukrainian, from the Donetsk region.
The water slowly flooded the area at the mouth of the Irpin, forming an impassable place and resting against the sluice under the Shevelsky Bridge in the village of Chervoniai. So far, it has not been possible to find out how it happened that the sluice was raised and did not allow water from the Dnieper to pass through. The system of cables and cradles allows you to move the sash manually by one person. There are 2 versions. Either someone decided to help in such a way that the swamps on the way to Lydas would be flooded as much as possible. Or it was a deliberate sabotage aimed at preserving the occupiers' passage to Moshchun. They called on the military-civilian administrations to start dumping water into the Irpin in the region.
At that time, the military-civilian administration and water resources of the region, both Kyiv and Zhytomyr, were involved in this, so that all the locks that go up the river were as open as possible, raised, so that all the water, the remnants of water or the accumulated water that is there in the tributaries, in the river, over these small dams, so that it all goes down as much as possible.
But the reservoir connecting to the Irpin River basin was not enough to quickly fill the floodplains around Kiev. Thoughts of sabotage, but an urgent check showed that the orders had been carried out.
Of course, at that time I did not know that the water would rush into the sluice in the Chavon village. I did not know then how much pressure would be exerted, that there would be a crossing over the pontoons to Moshchun. At that moment I had in my head only that it was necessary to flood. But at the same time it was necessary to preserve it so that there was no water hammer, so that Demidov did not go underwater. If we take satellite images, then by March 7th, the Irpin was already completely flooded as impassable, but Chavon village and the embankment of the road that went to this lock, it is also called the Shevelevsky Bridge, they became like a second dam.
At first, they tried to destroy the dam on the Chervon village with shots from self-propelled guns Pion. However, the bridge concrete reliably protected the sashes. Having driven through those places, we saw that it was technically possible to break through the lock with a shot from a tank on the hill from Hudamezierska.
But because of the trees, the cities were not visible. If that gateway were hatched from here, roughly speaking, by direct fire, well, it really can't be seen from here. You can see it on the horizon, but you can't see it behind the trees. I have a recording in my phone when Kolya came here. He says that you can't see anything behind the trees.
It was no longer possible to fire shots from other positions, as Russian troops kept the slopes under fire control with anti-tank weapons. And as proof of this, we noticed a wrecked Ukrainian infantry fighting vehicle nearby. Only looking at the surroundings on the Shevelyovsky Bridge itself, it does become clear how the lock could be quickly destroyed.
They shot from Boyarka, with Pion.
From Boyarka? Here? And did they hit?
Not right away. There we hit directly. Mikhailovich estimated, and I corrected it. Was the task partially completed? It had no effect. We decided that there was no point in wasting shells here. We tried 3 times, and the 3rd time we hit, but later, this bridge and these sashes were blown up after the enemies approached. Because when the dam was blown up for the 2nd time in Kozorovichi, the water went away, and it overflowed there, on the other side. That's where the overflow was, roughly speaking, and it flooded already opposite Moshchun.
But in that situation, it was impossible to make such an assessment, and maybe it was not necessary, since the second explosion in Kozorovichi closed all questions about the flooding of the approaches to Kiev.
If no one raised the gateway and someone raised the gateway, it would be released by default. If no one had lifted the sluice here, for the lock, the water would have gone further.
That is, it was sabotage, such actions.
No one knows what it was. That is, to this day, no one knows who raised it.
The big water did not reach Moshchun. Meanwhile, the Russian military was rapidly preparing a breakthrough to Moshchun. On March 7, 2022, observers of the EYES project reported on the construction of a pontoon and a breakthrough of enemy equipment.
They're bastards, of course. We will never accept them and we will hate them, but they should not be underestimated in the military sphere. And they understood that this was the closest way to Kiev, because through the forest you are already on the Shevchenko Square, and then develop only your successes and that's it. Of course, they focused there.
On March 7, Russian troops attempted to break through the Irpin.
Siersky returned, as usual, from a tour of the front lines. He personally toured every position, knew where he stood up to the machine gun. And, of course, he is tired, because everyone does not sleep, including him, for days. And he comes, and such a report of individual units, reconnaissance and so on begins. And during this report, Tai Kohod bursts into conversation. He sat right next to me and said, "We have a breakthrough on Moshchun. 2 of my groups report that they see that the enemy's transport is already on our side." Well, as on our side? On the other side of the river in Moshchun, where we are holding the defense. Siersky immediately gives the command to raise the UAV. It was already night, it was dark, I don't remember, maybe 10, in the evening, something like that. The bird flies quite quickly, we see it online, and we see that there are already, if I'm not mistaken, 10 or 12 units of equipment on our side. And there is an organized pontoon bridge, along which the personnel are streaming. Of course, here the artillery is instructed, and they start shooting there. As soon as the first arrivals of our artillery came, of course, they began to stir up and began to hide. And at some point, the commander said, "Come on, turn the camera to the other side." And the camera turns to the other side, and at that moment everyone is just, how to put it culturally, surprised by the amount of enemy equipment that was on the other side and was waiting for its turn to move here. It's just kind of horrible. And then there was a command to destroy the equipment and armored vehicles. And everything we had at that time was included there.
Despite the flare-up, Russian commanders saw the effectiveness of pontoon crossings and decided to succeed in numbers.
There was information from intelligence officers, or some interceptions, or information that they were planning to confuse us and exhaust our opportunities. They planned to throw a huge number of pontoon bridges at the same time. Well, that is, there are dozens, in different places, which would make it impossible to crush them all. You know, we are still working here one pontoon bridge at a time, but they still go on 2 others. So far, these bridges have been broken here, and they are already driving here, or still going there, and it could have worked, and then the commander made such a decision quite correctly.
Kolya, have you seen the dam? For the last time. I need the difference in the water level in the sea today. 2 meters, 3 meters.
Didn't go there because they said there were snipers there.
And in general, what is the difference in the height of the water?
4 meters.
4 meters?
Yes.
I heard you. Rather, it is necessary to break the dam now, because the whole army there has set its sights on these pontoons.
The second explosion was carried out by military soldiers of the 72nd Brigade, who were monitoring the dam in Kozaroviki, taking it under fire control.
Call whoever is closer to the river, to the Irpin, so that everyone can go up. In particular, here is the farm with horses. I don't know whether it took out the horses or not.
Sasha, they say that there is a lot of vehicles from the Demidov checkpoint to Siniak. There, well, in Demidov itself.
Yes, I know, I can already see it. Oh, in Demidov itself?
Yes.
Okay, I understand, thank you.
I wish you good health.
Back.
Just now I got a call from some Damien. They are now at the dam and we're going to blow up more shields.
Well, yes.
That is, are you aware?
Yes, there is a problem. There is nothing without it, unfortunately.
Understood. That's it, I just clarified.
A powerful explosion from tons of explosives demolished all obstacles in the way of water from the Kiev Sea. The level rose rapidly, the wave rolled along the shore near the blocked lock of the Shevelsky Bridge and carried the rescue water to Moshchun and further upstream of the Irpin River and its tributaries.
Everything was flooded. Everything was fine. Even in Huta there is a difference of 2 meters in size, and already in Huta the gardens are drowned.
Well, there was no other choice. Again, the column is moving from Ivanki with tanks. Today will also be a difficult day.
The enemy's plans to establish a chain of crossings were thwarted. The idea of capturing the capital, declared by the enemy, was crushed in the battles in a few weeks, drowned in a swamp, since the armed forces of Ukraine simply would not have allowed them to restore bridges or install such long pontoon crossings.
This is a very hard engineering job that required a day's work at least and for a long time. And this gives us advantages, because we would constantly fire at these moments and they would not be able to do anything.
2 years later, the participants of the events met.
Hello.
Good health.
Here, at the dam, we heard that the Russian occupiers were torturing a hydraulic engineer to find a way to pump water out of the floodplains of the Irpin. Apparently, having received a refusal during torture, the Russian military, according to local residents, cut his hands.
They found photos and a hydraulic engineer took him to a pit in Dymyr, cut his hands and asked how to start up the station.
The whole line is standing under the fire here, and in Dimmer they cut his hands alive and with the question of how to launch the station. Well, these are no conditions of people at all.
But in fact, at that time it was impossible to resume the work of the station for 2 reasons. The occupiers destroyed the substation that fed the pumps. However, even if they were launched, it would not have had any result, since the water entered back through the destroyed sluice. Both 2 years ago and now, the swampy river strip protects Kiev from a possible offensive. And this incredibly beautiful natural line of defense will hold out at least until the complete victory over the Russian occupiers. It is clear that this is only a fragment of the incredibly powerful defense of Kiev and the liberation of the Kiev region. However, a very important fragment. Olecsa Kibkalo and the Channel 2014 were with you.